Now, I won't be as professional as the news reporters. You'll be able to see my cord, but hopefully that's not offensive. At home, I have a, I guess I kind of call it the bonsai category of maple growing in a pot. I've had it for several years, and a lot of people ask about doing some of that. And you know, we do have the little tiny, like desktop size bonsai, and those are fun for indoors, but outdoors, I thought I would start off showing a little bit how to do something like that in a container like that. And the container I've picked, you know, the one I have at home is terracotta, the clay, but it's pretty broad and then a little more shallow. I picked this one, and again you got the broad and shallow, but these pots that we have, they're a double layer, and so they have a layer of air in between them, and that really helps insulate the soil for cold and for warm. And then it also has some give, so if you get a little freezing in the soil, they don't crack or anything. And they've got, I think, a 10-year warranty on their finish. So they're a pretty nice pot for that. But one thing, especially with maples, they need ample moisture, but they don't like to have wet, soggy feet. So instead of just leaving the hole in the bottom, I'm going to take, we won't say who, but somebody dropped some clay pots, and I've got some pieces of them. And I just took a nice curved one like that, and I'm just going to set it over the hole in the bottom. That way the soil won't wash out, that hole won't get plugged up, but it doesn't take up a lot of room because I want the room for the roots and the soil. And then this one that I picked is called Waterfall, and it's going to have a nice weeping form to it and a green leaf maple. And so I'm just going to take it out of its pot, and if I set it in here, I could see it's just a little bit too tall. So I'm just going to take the bottom of it, and I'm just going to flare the sides out, and that'll kind of loosen that root, and anything circling, it'll give a chance to loosen. And then I'm going to just set it down in the bottom and spread that all, those loosened roots out to side, and it's just going to sit like that. And then when we're growing something in a container, we don't want to use dirt. We use potting soil. Our more common sizes are bigger than this. They have a little more pretty label. But this is all the soil I needed, so I got one of the smaller bags. And a lot of times people ask, you know, the differences with our soil compared to some of the others. And we have a lot more pine bark in them. And that is good for a couple of reasons. The dark dirt-looking stuff is peat moss, and it holds lots of water. But like I said, we need to have that drainage. Well, that pine bark lets that water flow through, and it keeps everything from getting packed together. So we've worked on this soil a long time. Back in like '93 when I started, one of my first jobs, I actually got all the different components and we mixed our soil ourselves to plant with. But once we got the formulas and the ratios we like, we have somebody else package it for us now. So that's a plus. But I'm just going to take the potting mix, and I'm going to just go around the edges with it to fill this up. And just turn it around and get a good amount to all the sides. The thing with a bonsai, or you know, this being a little bigger, I don't know if you'd still call it a true bonsai, but we're trying to create that illusion of a full-size tree in a miniature version. So as it grows, we'll do some different pruning and things. You always want to keep up to a third of that trunk exposed that you can see, because in nature a large tree you'd be able to see quite a bit of that trunk area. Now since this is a woodier plant, more used to growing in dirt, I am going to do a little bit of packing and settling of this soil. I'm not going to smash it down with anything, but just my fingers spread apart will kind of work that down in around those roots I spread out. And maybe just a little bit more soil. And with a lot of our woodier plants, people always ask a lot about fertilizing for things. And being in a container, our potting soil don't have fertilizers. We don't know what we're going to grow with them, so we want to add based on what we're growing. But woody plants, they have a flush of growth in the springtime. You get a major growth, most of your stuff happens, then the leaves expand, and it kind of stays that way through the season. Sometimes you'll get a little more growth late. But basically, perennials, trees, shrubs, they come out, have their big flush, don't produce their flower, their growth, and then they kind of just stay that way that season. So with them, we don't fertilize every week and stuff like we do with things that produce flowers year-round. But we need to have something here for them. And so what I'm using, this is by Carl Poole. It's a slow release. It's a 13, 13, 13, so it's kind of a balanced one. But this will release some every time that we water. And so it'll always have a little bit of nutrients. Now, based on the label, I need a little over 2 tablespoons for this whole pot, and that would last me probably about until it's time to do a fall feeding on a tree or a shrub. So I'm just going to spread that around, and then I loosely just work it in. It doesn't have to get all the way through, because as I water, it'll dissolve and work its way down. So now I've got that kind of settled. And then I'm going to do a little bit of pruning now. These little shears are nice for small things. But you kind of want to step back and look at what it's going to look like when it gets a little bigger. I don't like that one crossing. I'll take it off. That one's growing straight up in the air. I don't want him. And then if you look on some of these, there's a side shoot already started. All of our plants are like that with that branching habit. Well, if I wanted that branch to continue growing that way, I just find a shoot pointing the way I want and clip right above it. So that's what I've been doing here with this, just to give it a little bit of an idea. This has got a little dead tip from winter to it. But as I go through, if you look, this seems excessively long, but I kind of like the way it's growing. So I've got a spot right there. And this is something that happens all the time. That one's underneath, that one's underneath. And we'll just get a few of these out. I'm not going to do all of it for you guys, but you kind of get the idea. So when I step back, I've got that main tree and the rest of the form starting to happen. Plant-wise, we're good now. We want to water, regularly. But some of the other things with this, you think of an ornamental being this tree. I'm going to dress up the soil a little bit. Sometimes you could have little rocks or other little items to dress it up. But one thing I don't always talk about here that I really like, and I have been using it on mine at home now each year, is this cocoa shell mulch. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's made from the shells of the cocoa beans when they go to make chocolate. This is the outer hole. So, it smells like Hershey's. So, which I think is kind of a neat benefit too for the mulch, but it's a real small, natural looking mulch. And so once I put this on, it'll kind of help even the moisture so we don't just dry on top so bad. It'll dry more evenly. But as it kind of gets watered a few times, it makes a nice cap on there and a nice decorative. It gets a little darker as it ages. But for quite a while too, when it gets wet and you water it, it releases that chocolate smell again. I also have this in one of my big, long window planters in front of my house. I use this mulch as well. I like it. It really keeps the weeds out. It's a nice look. It's a different look. It wouldn't look quite right on where we're trying to get this miniature thought. If we had the big pieces of like cypress mulch or something, it wouldn't have the right look, I don't think, for that. So I'm pretty much done. I've got an inch or so of that mulch around the top here.